Hey, it's the Chief Bonding with Board Games. We're going to be doing a review of Bleeding Kansas by Decision Games and designed by John Paniski. All right, I'm right in Kansas. I'm in Wichita. So this is really an election game between pro and anti-slavery, historically based, completely historically based. And this is right up before the Civil War starts. Many folks say that this is what leads to the Civil War. So let's go see how it plays. So looking at the Bleeding Kansas board, you've got a victory track, you've got several different voting years, so we'll go into that in a second. You've got several different counties, and some counties will matter in regards to who controls them, some won't. Those that do count will have a circle around them, and you'll see the setup where there are areas that will have both anti-slavery and pro-slavery cubes on them. Those represent the historical nature of the people at this time between Missouri and Kansas and what was going on with the voting, whether or not Kansas was going to be a free state, an anti-slavery state or not. So you win the game, not surprisingly, by having the most victory points, and there's 3 ways to get those victory points. If you win an election, you can see the different years are broken up by the different colors. So when that final political marker, and there's several ways to get those on, ends up in the spot, and it's always an odd number in terms of the counters that are there, the person who has the majority of counters in each election year, when resolved, gets 2 victory points. Now the game will end after the final election in 1861 when the Civil War starts. But you can also get victory points by controlling the key counties. You want to control that county, and you control that county by having more of your cubes in that area than your opponent. Or if there's a tie, you want to be the player with the most controlled counties surrounding that county, and if there's still a tie, then nobody scores it. And then the third one's a little different. It's called a card coordination bonus. So a player can have these cards in their hand, so you'll have these cards, and I'll go over these cards in a moment, and if you end up getting 6 of the different symbols on the cards that allow you to do actions, you can turn those in for the bonus and get a victory point on the track. So that's the only 3 ways, and then obviously whoever's in the lead on the victory point track at the end of the last election wins the game. Let me go over how a turn works, or what your actions are on a turn. So on your turn, you'll have 2 cards in your hand. Your opponent won't know what they are. There is historical information on these cards, but it's just for kind of your learning pleasure. All this text will have nothing to do. It will just be these symbols at the top. Now, you will notice in this case there's a blue bordered card, there's a white bordered card, and you will have the butternut bordered cards. Blue are for the anti-slavery player, and I'll explain how that's different. White is neutral, and here's one of those brown or butternut cards so you can see the different colors that you might have in your hand. So you'll start with 2 cards in your hand, you'll draw one, and then you will pick one of those cards, unless you're doing that coordination bonus where you'll turn them in for a victory point, but otherwise you will pick one of the cards and you will pick a symbol, generally one symbol, I'll come back to that, on the card to take the said action. I'm inserting pictures as we go along just so you can see the symbols at the top. And in a second, I will break down what each of those symbols are. But while we're on the different colors, if I'm the anti-player, the blue cards will allow me to play either both of the actions that are on that card. So in this case, that's a cooperation and a skirmish. The cooperation are the hands shaking, and the skirmish are the crossed weapons. I could either do both of them, so I would pick one, do its action, then pick the other, do its action, or I could choose one of those symbols, let's say skirmish, and I could skirmish twice. and I could do that anywhere on the board. Now again, I'll come back to what those actions are in a second. Now, if I were stuck and I wanted to play the other faction's card, so again, I'm the anti-slavery player, the anti-player, and I want to take the movement action, which is the boot, I could take that action. But by taking the boot action, I actually will allow my opponent, the pro player, to take the alternate action available on the cards. They get a little bonus out of it. So I want to get their cards. I would love to have all the butternut cards if I'm the anti-player, because it'll limit the amount of things that player can do, but they're still going to get to do something on my turn. That's very cool. That's very crunchy, and it keeps everybody involved, or both players involved, as you play. So I'm going to pull in one of the player aids and just put a photo up on it so you can see it clearly and it's in focus. Just to explain what these different icons do when you use them on a card. So you're going to have the politics. That will allow you to take one of the chits of your type, your faction, and just put it in whatever election year you're in. If you skirmish, you are going to be fighting the other player and hopefully either dispersing their cubes. So if you would add in the number of cubes you have, you would add in the towns in that county that are of your color. So if I'm the anti-slavery player and there's a blue town in that county, again, I'll have an inserted picture, that the number of cubes I have would give me, let's say I have 3 cubes, I'd get 3 plus points for the cubes. If I have a town that's blue, I'm going to get another +1. And if it was my capital, let's say I was in Topeka or I'm in Shawnee County, where the anti-slavery capital is, I would get 2 for that. I would add whatever those numbers were, and both sides, both factions roll a die, a single 6-sided die, and then I'm looking for, if it's a tie, nothing happens. If I win by 1 or 2, I've won the victory, I will get to take a counter, use its violent side, put it down on the political track for that election year, and I will get to disperse the other player's cubes. I'll disperse 1 to a neighboring county, then they disperse 1, and back and forth until all of their cubes have fled that county. Very cool, because there's a lot of tactics used in where you disperse those cubes to. And the way in which you do that, where if I win, I'm dispersing 1, then the loser has to pick a county to place their cube, and then if there's more cubes, that just goes on until all that faction's cubes have fled said county. Now, if I win by 3, a margin of +3 or more, now I'm going to destroy a cube. So 1 cube has been completely destroyed, is removed from the board, and then we do that dispersal system again. Awesome. Let me go a little quicker through some of these. So influence is the fist, and that would be if there are white cubes in play. The white cubes are settlers that are moving through. They're going from east to west, and they'll be moving through the counties as they exit the board. But if they're in a county where I have a cube and some influence, they can come in. Sorry, if I have a cube, they are influential and they can come in and sway these cubes to flip to my side, and I can then get rid of the white cube and replace it with a cube of my color. That would be influence. You'll roll a die, you need a 5 or a 6. The number of your cubes helps influence that as plus numbers, so there's some cool stuff there. The boot is simply movement. I can pick a county and I can move my cubes whichever way I choose to. There's some caveats to all these, because if I play my faction card and I do a thing twice, sometimes you can do special things. So rather than come back to it, I'll explain it. With movement, if I played a faction card, a anti-slavery card, and I'm the anti-slavery player, and I did 2 movements, I could do a couple things. I could move 2 places, I could go 2 counties and move, or I could have a rally and have those around me come into the county I'm in. And I won't go into all of them, but several of the different icons will allow you to do special things like that. That's probably the hardest thing you got to remember as you play is, hey, I'm doing a double. I'm using one of my faction cards, and every once in a while I have to go check, because normally you don't get to like rally all the different troops into a county. You're simply moving them to an adjacent county however you wish. Cubes can break off. One could go to the west, one could go to the east. You can do whatever. But again, when you play one of your faction's cards, and if you double a certain thing, sometimes that gives you a little cool, little crunchy little bonus. You can burn stuff, so you can burn towns. That's what these are. You could come in and the pro player could end up burning Lawrence, which happened historically. And if Lawrence is burned, not only do you get a violence token to put onto whatever the election year is, you also will now not factor in Lawrence, which is a anti-slavery city. They won't be able to add in their little +1 bonus for trying to skirmish or influence settlers as they come through. So a lot of times your cubes, now you got to have cubes in that area to burn something, but your cubes will be running around, your skirmishers will be running around and doing violence. Migration is the wagon, and that just means you come in starting from the west. There'll be cubes all over this board. They start here, but as they migrate, they will move west. They always got to move west. They can move northwest or southwest, and the person that plays or the player that plays that card gets to pick how they move, because sometimes it might be to your advantage to move it into a county where you have some control, because maybe you want to influence that white cube, that settler, that neutral cube to come over to your side. But as this board goes and these migrations happen, these settlers are moving all over. I say settlers, we're aware of. These settlers will be all over the board, and you may want to trigger a movement to get them into a county where you have some influence, or you may want to trigger them to move so you can get them out of a county where your opponent has influence before they can influence them to join their side, thus increasing the number of cubes of their color that they have on the board. And then you'll see the little star there. The star is not like a symbol that allows you to do an action. It's just there to remind you that it allows you to add an action that you can do. So you can do the same action twice or both actions on the card, assuming it's your faction card. All right, so the review of Bleeding Kansas. First of all, you've got a real tight rule set that is, 15 pages long? 15 pages with the back showing you setup and reminding you a little more in depth from the cards on turn sequence. Lots of pictures, highlighted text in red for like key things to remember. It comes with a history book with, again, gorgeous photos, all the information from Patrick Baker from the Kansas-Nebraska Act to statehood. What you'll be simulating here in this historical area control voting game is the event that leads up to the Civil War. The last voting block you do is 1861, and then boom, the Civil War kicks off. This was, as the name implies, Bleeding Kansas. This was a very violent time in Kansas history. I'm living in Wichita, Kansas, with Missouri and Kansas going at it. With the whole system of, is Kansas going to be a free state or a slave state? And the way the actions trigger in the game, the way the cards flip, the speed of my turn, then your turn, then my turn, and your turn, and then the voting pushes going on with pure politics, and then the violence that shows the influence in the voting campaigns as well, just capturing history and pulling it right into the game. The area control of, these skirmishes, even if you way overwin a battle, which you really don't want to do in voting games, you just want to have enough to kind of win that county over. You don't need to overdo it, because that means you're probably letting it go in other places that you shouldn't. But if you do, you're only going to fully destroy one cube of the opponent's cubes, and then you're going to disperse them. Way better to be close to the margin and disperse and control and do multiple things rather than just one massive thing, which is a beautiful subtlety that you got to kind of work around. And what's your opponent trying to do? And settlers settlers are moving through the territory. You see them move. You can kind of direct their movement a little bit. You can win them over to your cause. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So, great game. Decision Games puts out some more obscure topics. This is one of those, but I think you're going to really like it as long as you enjoy those voting tug-of-war kind of games with the area control thrown in. The text that's on the card is really flavor text, historical understanding text. It's the icons on there that matter. And the player aids help you work through. There are edge cases sometimes in there. That's the only thing that'll take a little time to get used to or to learn. When you're playing your faction's card and you get to do a little double something, and it sparks it up a little bit. But just enough that you can say, ooh, I'm doing something special. Or, ooh, I got to play this card, but it's going to help my opponent a little bit too. But maybe if I do this, oh yeah, he can't. There's no skirmish he's going to want to do, or she's going to want to do. So if I take the move action, all they got left is the skirmish. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. Yes. And then you play it, and they're kind of looking at it, and then they're like, "What? I don't want to do that." I know. Sorry. So it's fun. It's got the little jabs you can take are just awesome. So I'm trying to get my wife to play this. My son, he's all right. He'll go in and play it. He loves some of the history that's going around in Kansas anyway, so it's a nice tie-in. I think my wife will love, although she doesn't like the get you games, and sometimes you are setting somebody up for a fall, but I think she'll love the voting element in that tug-of-war that's going on. So again, I really enjoyed this game. I think it's under the radar. As long as you like voting, as long as you don't mind area control, it's a gem of a game. Full disclosure too, I did have John on. I bought this game. This wasn't sent to me, but I had John on. We did an interview where we talked a little bit about Bleeding Kansas, but we also talked about GMT's release of Plains Indian Wars, which is supposed to be coming out soon as well. So I think John is on the whoop coming up. If you like what I've talked about, I think you may really enjoy this game, even though it's kind of, a lot of folks don't know about this little period of history. If you watch a little bit of Clint Eastwood's movie, the whole thing, Josie Wales, you see the violence that was going on in that kind of. Yeah. So that's what gets him involved, and then it goes off into the Civil War. But you see the very front scene is this kind of stuff. So, all right, go check it out. Chief, Modding with Board Games. See you guys. Bye.